Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly suggested. The following is only for educational and amusement purposes. This is the verbatim federal, according to Inner City Press. The seventh day of Sean Diddy's federal trial was already turning chaotic. When something unexpected happened, Joe Rogan, comedian, commentator, and host of the world's most downloaded podcast, strolled courthouse doors. No entourage, no attorneys, just a man carrying a small black notebook and a memory filled with unpleasant truths. What started as speculation, Joe Rogan's podcast commentary had taken a serious turn. He was here to testify under oath, and what he shared wasn't gossip but rather experience. Observation and a trail of receipts that went far beyond sensational headlines. It was evident this wasn't just a celebrity trial anymore. This was the unraveling of an entire system, and Joe Rogan had just taken the stand to lay the record straight. The Diddy trial began with an electrifying boom in the air. The press gallery was already full, rumors flying like wildfire, but nothing prepared anyone for what ensued when Joe Rogan, comedian, UFC commentator, and host of the most watched podcast in the world, went into the courtroom as a surprise witness. It wasn't simply a publicity gimmick. Full-throttle intervention, and Joe Rogan didn't come empty-handed sporting a dark gray jacket and trousers. Rogan cut a casual but concentrated image. He took the stand. The room became silent. No cameras were permitted, but court sketch artists hurried to capture every emotion. Diddy's defense team looked perplexed when the judge requested Rogan to state his name and profession. Joseph James Rogan. I'm the host of the Joe Rogan Experience. He didn't waste time, and I'm not here to gossip, he began. I'm here because I've been provided first-hand accounts from. I have recordings of guests on my program accounts who are deeply connected to what's going on in this courtroom, and yes, I have saved them. A wave of whispers went through the courtroom. Roger was suddenly being treated as a whistleblower. He spoke of interviews he had conducted over the years with ex-bodyguards, former label executives, and industry insiders, many of whom were too afraid to speak off the record, so they came to me not as a judge, but as someone who wouldn't cut the tape when the truth got painful. When Rogan dropped the first bombshell back in 2023, I had a guest on former security detail. For an A-list musician affair, he said Diddy has files, physical proof, films, and recordings on a private server stored in this guest claimed Jay-Z, LeBron, James, and other popular people were aware of the freak-offs, not necessarily participated, but they knew the courtroom exploded in gasps. Diddy seemed visibly concerned and his lawyers objected, but the judge overruled. Roger went on to explain how this specific guest had witnessed a lot of these occasions personally, describing them as rites. More than parties, Rogan said phones were confiscated, visitors were blindfolded, the term freak-off was code inside the industry, and everyone pretended like it was normal. The prosecution inquired if Rogan had brought any recordings. He nodded and said, I sent snippets to the DA's office before coming here. They comprise audio of unknown insiders discussing these events. Some of the voices have been validated by forensic audio specialists, as the judge ordered those tapes to be officially logged. Rogan said something that made every juror sit forward. I've had Navy SEALs, conspiracy theorists, professors, and even CIA whistleblowers, and I've never heard anything this awful come from the mouths of somebody so high. Up in Hollywood, he looked toward Diddy, and this isn't just celebrity gossip. It's institutional abuse hidden beneath platinum records and the red carpet. Smiles when Rogan relaxed further into his testimony. The court authorized him to narrate particular stories told by his podcast over the previous many years. He said that he had been piecing together a worrying trend since as early. In 2018, one of my early guests was a tour manager for a popular R&B act who came on to talk about the dark side of the music industry, drug culture, pay-for-play, and NDAs. But during the break, he told me something different. He said Diddy's parties weren't simply indulgent, they were hazardous. Roger highlighted that many of these discussions never made the final cut. People were afraid. One guest begged me to mask his voice, distort his name, and even record his portion in a remote. He then cited a producer who had been invited to a Diddy-hosted event in 2015 and told me what he witnessed there left him. Shaking cameras installed in smoke detectors, people sneaking stuff into drinks, A-list celebs pretending Not noticed, Joe read from notes collected during the off-air conversation. He added, and I quote, "I watched people being filmed against their consent, and Diddy called it." When the judge inquired if these accusations were verified, Roger replied that many were anecdotal, but too many lined up to ignore they weren't rumors, circulated in hallways. These were comprehensive descriptions, time frames, locations, many persons describing the same set behaviors. He detailed how he maintains a hidden collection of these unaired stories, shielded by NDAs he drafted with legal advisors. "I didn't want to be sued into oblivion, but I also didn't want this stuff buried." When he mentioned the Jane Doe lawsuits, I began connecting the dots. When the identities and conduct in those cases matched what my visitors had been muttering for years. At one point, he revealed in 2022, a major music video director came to him, sobbing, and informed him he had unpublished, unedited footage of one of Diddy's parties, said he was too terrified to go public, but he had been blackmailed into taping these incidents for almost a decade. Joe continued by adding, This is a reckoning, not a court of opinion, and I'm here because those who trusted me with the truth need to be heard, even if they're too terrified to expose their faces." Joe Rogan took a deep breath before moving to the event that made headlines across the globe. Elon Musk's unexpected remarks against Jennifer Lopez and Diddy on his podcast were casual at first. Joe stated, "We were talking about Hollywood hypocrisy, how certain celebrities speak up about politics but remain silent when it comes to people they truly know." Elon brought up Jennifer Lopez. The courtroom leaned in. He said she dated Diddy, went to his parties, knew who he was, and why hasn't she ever warning anyone? Rogan halted. That clip skyrocketed. It got millions of views. But what surprised me was how quickly people jumped to defend instead of asking what she might be hiding. J-Lo reminded the court of the 1999 nightclub shooting that led to Shine's. Jennifer was in the car when the gun was allegedly thrown out the window. She said Diddy didn't do it, walked free. Shine went to prison, and Jennifer, she kept seeing Diddy for 2 more years. Joe let that sit with the jury. Before proceeding, what does it indicate when someone steps out of a shooting aids, protect the detained man, and remains with him while someone else gets the fall? He then added a terrifying line. What happens if you're just flawless for the devil? Roger pointed out that while many celebrities blogged about Diddy's altruism, nobody spoke up when the litigation started stacking up. Where was J-Lo when the freak-off tapes were referenced? And where was she when Shine finally informed the truth? About 1999, he closed with a clear statement. "I'm not saying she did anything criminal, I'm saying silence in the face of abuse is complicity, and too many people in Diddy's orbit have learned the art of fleeing when the cameras turn." Joe Rogan leaned forward, returned to a narrative that had troubled him for months, a story involving what one of his off-the-record guests dubbed the bunker, a former bodyguard who worked. When Diddy's Miami compound appeared on my show in 2022, Rogan said, "We didn't air that segment because he got cold feet." But what he? According to Rogan, the bodyguard described a reinforced basement-like vault hidden beneath the mansion, accessible only by The witness stated there were dozens of encrypted hard disks inside the black box, which he referred to as Diddy's insurance policy. Detailed footage of freak-off parties, blackmail material, contracts, hidden camera videos, and not just of random people or famous executives. Politicians in the courtroom gasped. Diddy's defense team obviously uncomfortable. One jury reached for their water glass with shaky hands. The man told me he once went in during a backup session. There were racks of servers all air-gapped. He didn't get far. A person with a rifle urged him to leave the room immediately. "That is, Diddy's church," the guard replied. Joe paused. That statement stayed with me because whatever was in that chamber was important to someone. Sacred because it held. However, the judge allowed the prosecution to bring Rogan's affidavit, including this account, into evidence, explaining that while although the existence of the vault had not been independently verified, verification from many podcast guests made it significant for creating a behavioral two other guests, both stylists who have dealt with bad boy artists, independently described a downstairs room where surveillance cameras were facing inward. One even claimed she was asked to sign an NDA in the very room after witnessing what seemed like a disguised peephole embedded in the mirror. That's what's terrifying. Rogan said people described these settings, these rituals, in the exact same way years apart from different walks of life. He revealed something the courtroom hadn't heard before 3 months ago. A whistleblower anonymously came out to my staff, stated they worked for a third-party data recovery company in Miami and were hired to extract encrypted footage from a broken server, claimed some of it showed people at Diddy's events in compromising situations. I didn't air it, but I saved it because if this trial reaches the federal seizure level. He closed the interview by staring straight at Diddy and said, "If you're innocent, let them search the basement and open the, by this moment." The courtroom had moved. And Joe Rogan was more than simply a celebrity witness. He was an informant, pointing to a pattern of manipulation, terror, and silence. "I want to talk about patterns," he stated, turning through a thick Sethan-written texts. "Because this isn't just about parties, it's about control, fear, image, and silence." Rogan drew out a list of prior guests who hinted at secrets but never followed through, one of which was a hairstylist who dealt with A-level celebrities. The show to discuss fashion, but off-screen she informed me she left the industry due of what Diddy made her witness one night at a Hamptons house party. She observed someone being videotaped in a private room through a two-way mirror, then he spun. When I asked her who else was there that night, she hesitated, and then Rogan reiterated that she did not imply Jay-Z participated in anything, but she did state he was present many times. He walked around those events like a ghost, never speaking, never lingering, but he was there. The suggestion wasn't that Jay's committed a crime, it was that he saw and said nothing. I've had ex-security dancers, personal assistants, and producers all say the same thing. Jay-Z and Diddy was like two sides of the same coin. One was noisy, chaotic, and the other was controlled, quiet, and calculated. But the scenes were always the same, according to Roger. He once asked a business insider about why nobody called out the practice. Joe smiled and said, "He told me you don't take down Puff without pulling Have." The prosecution latched on the line because it fit their idea of institutional protection. People turning, he added, "If Diddy was the fire, Jay-Z was the smoke detector that never went off." He then spoke about how his team received anonymous texts, warning them to drop the Diddy topics. One email said, "Don't dig too deep, Joe, you'll end up like the ones who did." We traced that IP address it came from a firm affiliated to Roc Nation's PR team. The judge approved the remark with a cautionary note. Roger looked to the jury and added, "Silence is a weapon." Joe's tone changed. "And this entire machine is built on people keeping their mouth shut, but I'm not built that way." As he brought to the last set of names, those he said were in the wrong room at the wrong time. You all recall the Man Zero lawsuit, and the one where a man claimed he was paraded around Diddy's party in a mask made of human anatomy. That's not rumor. I spoke with someone who was on the yacht. He recounted a young filmmaker in his early 20s who had been engaged to shoot an event in January 2023. He told me he was just required to document. Joe then read from an anonymous transcript that there were celebrities everywhere, including LeBron James, Gloria Estefan, Jay-Z, Beyonce, folks smiling. But the further back you walked, the darker it got. There were rooms with red lights, people restrained, and a male. Despite being led around like a pet, the courtroom was dead silent. Joe said that the individual claimed to have turned over his memory cards at the conclusion of the night. Dids. Crew offered him $5,000 and took the tape, telling him he would get a final cut later. He never heard from them again. This evidence was so powerful because it led directly to a legitimate civil complaint. You assume this is all anarchy, but it's not. It's a system, and the frightening thing is that the individuals we idolize are in the rooms where it happens. He closed with a chilling line. If even one of those records is played in court, this industry is over. He glanced down, closed his notebook and stated, "I'm not worried of getting sued. I'm afraid of what happens if we keep pretending this, Joe." Rogan's tone altered once more, moving from celebrity complicity to the infamous 2023 yacht party that had been rumored about in court files but never publicly documented. Till now, the boat narrative folks believe it's a myth, Rogan began. But it's true, and I have testimony from two distinct persons who were on that boat. One crew member and one visitor. The courtroom froze when Diddy's legal team began. Joe, talking furiously, opened a letter from a former yacht staffer redacted to protect their name. They were employed for what they felt was, during a private music video shoot, they were informed that the passengers were VIPs and were not permitted to use their phones. Security patted them down before boarding, and when the boat entered international waters, the tone changed. Curtains were shut and a private area was closed. Then came what the crew dubbed the rotation, new visitors brought in every hour escorted by security. Joe's voice grew colder. The witness stated their hidden cameras put inside mirror frames. Some of the workers were asked to spike drinks. They refused, but others didn't, and a quiet overtook the gallery. The visitor that came forward wasn't intended to be there. He was a last-minute addition as a favor to someone in the industry he believed it would be. Networking, it turned out to be something else totally. Joe quoted the guest's experience. There was a man in a mask. People were laughing at him. It was like, except it wasn't performance art. People had their phones out, and some of the individuals watching were quite famous. One of the names Rogan mentioned appeared in many testimonies, Gloria Estefan. No one suggesting she participated in anything, he stressed. But her name came up exactly like LeBron's. Same like Beyonce's, like Jay-Z's, creates a troubling image. Joe then dropped the most important detail. After the yacht docked, he was provided. He refused money to forget what he witnessed, and 2 weeks later, his flat was broken into, with just his external hard drives taken. The court ordered the statement. Put into evidence, Rogan gazed at the jury. People risked their lives to speak the truth while others were bribed to forget it. Had transformed the tenor of the entire trial. No longer was this about celebrity antics, but about institutional intimidation, power, and blackmail. Let me talk about leverage, he remarked bluntly. Because what Diddy established wasn't just a party environment, but an ecosystem of quiet. He informed the court that many podcast guests off-air, in whispers and sometimes tears, recounted the exact same process. You're invited to a party, you're told to sign an NDA, you're videotaped without knowing, and then a month later you get a text, not a threat, just a reminder to have fun. Last, Joe termed it a network of invisible chains, and he revealed how a Grammy-winning producer informed him that he had been offered a major career boost in exchange for deleting a video taken at a Diddy party. He refused, and 3 venues canceled his tour a week later. Roger also noted how he'd received legal letters from PR firms advising him to cease criticizing certain individuals he didn't name, but the jury didn't need a road guide back then. The unsettling aspect came when a guest who used to work for a celebrity security service told me that there was a master folder dubbed the Rainy Day file. Joe stated that this folder included off-site backup film and encrypted insurance. The notion is that if anyone attempted to take him down, he'd reveal what he had on them. He took a long breath. One of those files, the source said me, depicted a very important politician whose name is not mine to say. But if the feds have those tapes, this trial is just the beginning. The court ordered that remark stricken, but the harm was done, and Joe wrapped the segment with, "This wasn't fame, this was fear." He didn't just throw parties, he built a vault of silence. And if one key turns, it all comes flooding out as his testimony reached its completion. Joe Rogan stood from the witness chair. He wasn't asked to, but he needed to finish standing. "This isn't about canceling Diddy," he added. "About finally holding someone accountable who built an empire on fear. The Judge P. The Judge P."